Okay, I'd now like to welcome to the show three-time champion, four-time MVP, Hall of Famer, and one of the most exciting players to ever lace him up, the Dr. Julius Erving. Welcome to Talking Sports with the Bird. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing real good. So they call you the Bird, huh?
You can call me the Bird. I'm not that Bird, so don't choke me. I'm the Bird after Larry Bird. All right. So,
all good.
Listen, I want to bring you back to a memory. We're up here in Connecticut, and I hope you remember this, because back in the early 70s, you did a photo shoot. You did a commercial for Dr. Pepper at Fairfield University. Now, I don't know if it was 72, 73, or 74. It might have been your first year as a net, and I lived right up the street from Fairfield U, and we walked down there, watched you film that commercial, and that was really the first time that I had ever seen a star up close and personal, and that gym was full of people just to watch you shoot a commercial. And this is back way before the days of the internet and social media and stuff like that. Do you remember that? Because if you don't, I don't have a story.
No. I do remember that. It was quite the day. And, we've done over the years probably 3 or 4 different versions of Dr. Pepper commercials at different times in different decades. But that was the first. There's only one original. Yep.
Tell the story. That was a lot of fun, man, because we went down to Fairfield. We were like 14, 15 years old, and we were like awestruck. And the one thing I did take away, what a nice guy you were, and how long it took just to shoot a 30-second commercial. Talk about you were sitting on those bleachers for hours waiting for stuff to happen.
Yeah, hurry up and wait. That's the way the industry works, and probably why I haven't had an acting career. There's too much sitting around and standing around.
I can imagine. Listen to Hall of Famer Julius Erving. Tell the story, the Dr. J nickname, when you got that nickname, and how when you played growing up at Rucker Park, how other people tried to bestow other nicknames on you. Talk about the originality of the Dr. J.
They were years apart, the Rucker story versus the original nickname. I have a buddy I used to play basketball with. We were 9th, 10th graders, and he was very argumentative, and he was kind of a lecturer on the court. So I ended up calling him the professor, and he reciprocated by calling me the doctor, because he said, you got all these moves, and you taking these patients to the hole, and some of them ain't surviving it or whatever. So I'm gonna call you the doctor, and I called him the professor. And we grew up. We went to UMass together. We shared that nickname in and around the campus. And then when I left college after my 3rd year, that summer league, when I was playing in the Rucker, the announcers started calling me the Claw and Black Moses and different names, Houdini, and, different nicknames, because they were assigning me a nickname. And I went over to the announcer and said, look, I got a nickname. People call me the doctor. And the doctor kind of hit a new high at that summer league. And then when I went to training camp with the Virginia Squires, I found out that the team position was called Doc, and there was another guy at the organization called Doc. So our trainer said, well, you're going to be Dr. J. That's going to distinguish you from the other guys who we call Doc. And that's when the nickname Dr. J was born.
I'm curious, Doc, when you played in Rucker, and we know it's a total different vibe with the music going on, the fans crazy, the DJs, everybody's yelling, screaming, giving you nicknames, stuff like that. And when you saw what happened this past Sunday at Madison Square Garden, where they put that thing up on the board, where they were not going to have any music and we're going to return to the sounds of traditional basketball. Now, Draymond Green, who's an outspoken guy, kind of felt there were racial overtones to that. What's your feel about that? First of all, it was a little odd with no noise. You need anything to distract you from a Knick game, so I'm surprised they did that. But what was your feeling? It's bad, Doc. We're Knick fans up here. We're bad. So talk about what your feel about that was.
Well, I wasn't even aware of it, so I'm just hearing about it now. And, the Garden for a long time has been known to, just have the organ player up in the balcony. And that was, that was their standard. And, the guy would get the crowd going with the organ. And everybody's always wondered where the organ guy was. Was he up in the rafters? Is he on the catwalk or what have you? So that was my best recollection. I think there is too much stuff going on at these basketball games other than the playing of the game. But you have a more widespread fan base right now who I know when I take my 11-year-old daughter to a game or an event, the last thing she wants to really pay attention to is what's going on the court. She's paying attention to everything else. And she wants to leave the seat, come back to the seat, leave the seat, come back to the seat, even watching her brother play at high school. She leaves. She doesn't watch the game.
Yeah.
So I imagine on a higher level, the same thing happens where, the fans need something else to garner their attention. And so it's up to the organization to supply that. And, you got parachutes coming out of the sky. Obviously, you got the cheerleaders. Obviously, you got the trampoline guys jumping and dunking. And so much goes on. And me, being more of a purist, I would rather look at the coach either massaging his players or yelling at his players in the huddle. I would even like to hear what's being said, as opposed to being distracted, doing timeouts, et cetera, et cetera.
You're listening to Dr. J. You talked about UMass, and you played 2 seasons there, and you were a 20-point, 20-rebound average guy. People don't realize back then there was no dunking in college basketball. How tough was that? Because obviously knowing the way you could sky, still putting up those numbers, but the fact that there was no dunking, how much did that restrain your game?
Well, yeah, I always say that, when I got to the pros, it was like having the chains taken off. The more minutes, because 48-minute game versus a 40-minute game, so you got more time on the court to do your thing. Greater challenge in terms of teams from 1 to 12 all being pros, versus in college. College teams might have 2 or 3 good players, or even sometimes 1 good player, and then the other guys are very average. So we played an up-tempo game. We scored better than 80 points a game. And I had, guards who liked to shoot, John Betancourt and Mike Pagliara, and they could put it up, but they were, probably shooting 45%. So that meant 55% of their shots missed. So I always attacked the boards, and I think that kind of padded my rebound average, because I got a lot of offensive rebounds, because I could position myself very well when they shot, because I was used to, seeing them. And when I saw where the ball was going to come off, if I saw it was offline and it was going to miss, a lot of times I'd retrieve it and then, put it back in the basket. So those numbers, they were earned. And, it was a hard-fought battle. And like you said, no dunking. But, nobody was doing a whole lot of dunking in college basketball anyway. And then, mostly, if anybody, it was the centers.
You mentioned you joined the ABA Virginia Squires as an undrafted free agent. When did you realize that going pro, in your 2 years at UMass, when did you realize that going pro was an option?
Well, I actually got called by an agent, a guy named Steve Arnold, who, contacted me through some of my friends from high school, the teachers who I was friends with in high school. And we arranged a meeting just to explore, what the options were. And, the meeting started out to be an exploratory one-day meeting. It ended up being a 2-day meeting, in which at the end of the 2 days, I was offered and signed a contract.
Your rookie year, 71-72, you talked about a dunk in your autobiography over Artis Gilmore and Dan Issel, 2 Hall of Famers that everyone knows. That was the moment you basically said in the book that you knew you belonged. We're going to talk about other shots you've taken everybody knows a little more of, but talk about that first dunk more than 40 years ago and how it gave you the belief that you belong here.
Yeah, the interesting thing about it, it was actually an exhibition game. And, on my team, I had, Ray Scott, Charlie Scott, Neil Johnson, Jim Akins, Fatty Taylor. We had, some significant guys, and Charlie, clearly was our best player.
Yep.
And the guy who was really established as a multiple-time All-American and had a Hall of Fame career going until he, broke his arm. So he was like the featured guy, and everybody geared up for him, and I was kind of like, Robin, playing the Batman Robin scenario. And just, finding my own and, expanding my game. So I got the ball on the baseline went around the defender, and Dan Issel and Artis Gilmore are coming over to help. So I felt when I got airborne that I went past Issel, and I actually seemed to see his hand coming down, and I was still going up for whatever reason. And next thing I know, I could see Gilmore's hand, and Gilmore's 7'2".
Yep.
And I see his hand come down. And I'm like, and I don't know whether it was adrenaline or whatever that made me jump that high at that moment on that play. But, I kind of looked back at the basket and dunked the ball and realized that I had gone past three guys. One was on the ground and two had jumped. And, I just ran down court, and I was, it was almost unbelievable to me. And as you know, obviously with those fans, I don't think they had seen anything like that. And as you mentioned, Gilmore's a Hall of Famer and Dennis was a Hall of Famer. So it wasn't against chumps.
You got that right. Now, you're eligible for the draft. I know you left UMass after the 2 years. You were eligible for the NBA draft in 1972. And I'm surprised because I had Oscar Robertson on the show 2 weeks ago, and we talked about the lawsuit that he brought upon as the player thing against the NBA, and that took a long time. But the Milwaukee Bucks in 71-72 had your draft right. You could have been on a team, you talk about no chumps, with Oscar Robertson and then Lou Alcindor. Talk about that whole thing when you were eligible for the draft. You wound up signing up with the Atlanta Hawks, and then you had to go back due to an injunction to the Virginia Squires. Talk about that and explain a little better, because I'm kind of unsure as to what happened there.
Okay. Well, living in Atlanta now, there are a lot of people, who droop their shoulders sometimes when they just think about the fact that Pete Maravich and Lou Hudson and I could have played together.
Oh, my God. Yep.
And, I guess Milwaukee, Milwaukee did win the title without me. But it probably would have been beneficial to my career to play with Oscar Robertson and Lou Alcindor at the time, who's now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yep.
So as it turned out, I go to UMass for 3 years. I played freshman ball and played 2 varsity seasons. So, I actually left after my junior year.
Yep.
And played a year in Virginia. So during that first season in Virginia, it would have been my last year in college, and the NBA had a rule that players are eligible for the draft once their class graduates. So when my class graduated in May of 1972, it made me eligible for the June draft. Now, unbeknownst to the draft and the NBA as a whole, my agent had worked out a deal with the Atlanta Hawks. And it gave me a signing bonus, gave me a residence, and a whole deal, maybe a 4 or 5 year contract, which was going to be effective either at the end of my Virginia Squires contract or if my contract was ruled null and void. And there were a lot of grounds for it to be ruled null and void, because there were missed payments and there were different things that went on during that time. And, I thought it was just the way things happened in Rome, because it happened to all of us, right? All of our players. So, my agent kind of discounted the whole Milwaukee situation because it hadn't occurred yet. We were under contract. I got 2 contracts, one with Virginia and one with Atlanta.
Yep.
And I'm, kind of chomping at the bit a little bit to play with Atlanta after 1 year in the ABA, because I was the NBA, and that was, now I was 22 years old, and I kind of gone around the league one time. I enjoyed it, but, Atlanta was a special city during that time, especially in the 70s. It was really booming. It was very diverse, and, really just, it was a great place for African Americans to be and to think about planning, the lifestyle and et cetera, et cetera. So the Hawks have me signed, and the draft comes, and they have one of the first 10 picks. I think they picked maybe 4th or 5th. And Milwaukee has two first-round picks, and they picked maybe 3rd and 12th. So Milwaukee drafts Russell Lee, who's a very good player, great player. The Hawks draft Steve Bracey, And then the Bucks come back and draft 12th, and they draft me.
Yep.
So I'm already a pro, and I'm already signed to 2 contracts.
So that's good. Okay.
So they draft me. So I was nowhere near the draft. It wasn't back then. It wasn't like today. Everybody dresses up and goes to the draft, and everybody's excited about being a pick.
Yeah.
Whatever. And so it's a special day. So draft day didn't really mean anything to me. I already had 2 contracts as a pro, and I'm already playing in one. And the promise of the other one was there once this one was over.
Yep.
By hook or crook. So Milwaukee cries foul. Atlanta cries foul.
Yes.
You can't draft this guy. We haven't won a contract. And then the league, basically stood by Milwaukee, to preserve the draft and the status of the draft. And it went to arbitration in New York. So Robert Morgenthau, who was the arbitrator on all these issues in New York, ruled against Atlanta. So I had to give up my contract with Atlanta, but not without a fight. So I actually went to training camp with Atlanta, and Cotton Fitzsimmons was coaching. And from the first practice on, it was amazing. It was amazing playing with the pistol. And Lou never missed an open shot. Walt Bellamy. So they got 3 Hall of Famers already without me.
Yep, exactly.
I'm like a second-year player coming in, and I'm the juggernaut or whatever. So looking at playing with those guys, we were in camp, and we got all the way through camp to the exhibition season and played 2 games. And we played 2 games, and I think that team pretty much posted better than 140 points in each of those games. I think we played Houston both times. And then the commissioner ordered that Atlanta sit me down. And they were going to fine them, whatever it was, $50,000 for each game that I played. And back then, $50,000 was a lot of money. The owners, as wealthy as they were like, well, we're going to have to sit them down until we work this out.
Yep.
And so I sat down for the next 2 exhibition games. And my agent came and picked me up, and we went back to Virginia.
Yep.
And then I ended up...
the rest is history. And listen to Hall of Famer Dr. J. Julius Erving. You talked about Pistol Pete Maravich, and you've gone on record, I think it was in your autobiography, basically saying one of the most skilled players I've ever played with. Now, you've played with some of the greats. People do forget about Pistol Pete. They know the 44-point average at LSU, but he did not have a stellar NBA career for a lot of reasons. Talk about how special a player Pistol Pete was.
Well, the Hawks just honored Pistol Pete less than a week ago. And when you see some of the highlights and the stuff that, went viral online about what he did, he was the most skilled player of all time. There's no question about it. His ambidexterity, his ability to score the ball, his ability to imagine and then do, and his ability to predict. He was kind of like Babe Ruth in that he's like, okay, I'm going to come across the lane, I'm going to go up in the air, I'm going to rock the cradle with the ball, and then I'm going to throw it up above the square, and then it's going to come down through the hoop. And, if you're playing horse with him, you're like, no, you ain't. And the next thing you know, you got H.
Listen to Hall of Famer Dr. J. So you go back to Virginia. Eventually, Virginia is cash-strapped. They got to kind of give you up to the Nets. Where you go there, you win 2 out of 3 championships. I don't want to name drop, but I had Joe Namath on about a month ago, and he said that Super Bowl, when he played with the Jets, it seemed like a lot of the NFL didn't take the AFL serious. Now, you just mentioned your first year in Virginia. You enjoyed it, but you still were looking like, now maybe you were younger, but you still said, I'd rather be in Atlanta in the NBA. Did you feel like when you played for the Nets and when you played for the ABA, there was a total lack of respect for ABA players? Because you guys had an unbelievable amount of talent in the A. But did you feel a lack of respect from the NBA teams?
Yeah, I think that's a true statement. There was a lot of respect, a lot of disrespect, and the irony is, when we played in the summer, when we played in college, you're playing against the same guys in college. So you go to summer leagues, you're playing against the same guys. But guys who went to the NBA versus going to the ABA, they seem to have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and they felt as though they were better and they were more elite. And that was just a condition of the mind, and that's why with that first NBA ABA All-Star game, it was a showcase for us as ABA players, and then with the first game after the merger, which I was MVP. And we had 11 players who with former ABA experience who were represented out of a field of 24. So it was saying that the best of both leagues were comparable, and they probably had an argument to say that down the line, some of the ABA teams, when you got to, player 9, 10, 11, 12, were weaker than player 9, 10, 11, 12 on the NBA teams.
You listen to Julius Erving, Hall of Famer, Dr. J. I want to go back. I got to give another shout-out to a Connecticut guy, the late, great Super John Williamson. You joined the Nets, and in your autobiography, you have a funny line. You said from the start of camp, it was clear that I was a spiritual and psychological leader of the team. There were great locker room moments, as when rookie John Williamson announced to the team, "Look, if you want to win, get the ball to Super John." And you said, "And that's you? Let me get this straight. Super John and you are the same person?" So you have a problem with Super John, doing the Bo Jackson or the Deion Sanders speaking in the third person. But just talk about what an unbelievable talent Super John Williamson out of New Haven, Connecticut was.
He's one of my favorite guys, one of my favorite teammates of all time. And, he never saw a shot that he didn't like, but he never backed down from any challenge. And it was really odd that, in his rookie year, he comes in and, we were not off to a very good start. I think our team had maybe, gone on maybe an 8-game losing streak early in the season. And we couldn't figure out, what was going on in there. And we had one of those, players-only meetings.
Right.
And, of course, John just stood up and said, I'm not getting enough minutes. That's why we're losing. So, we obviously thought about it as players, and Kevin Lockery thought about it as a coach. Put him in the starting lineup. We immediately lost the next game, and then we won the next 9 in a row. And he was never out of the starting lineup after that.
The 5 seasons in the ABA, talk about the originality and the fun you guys had. I already mentioned the talent with the Indiana Pacers and just the guys on your team with Larry Keenan, Billy Paultz, Melchione. I mean, the talent was incredible on some of those teams. But just talk about the fun and the originality. Everybody talks about the red, white, and blue ball, but it was basketball, in my opinion, in its purest sense. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think so. And, the underlying thing with the ABA is that from an attitude standpoint, it was one for all and all for one. I mean, anytime a guy got any publicity in Sports Illustrated, Sport Magazine, New York Times, the LA Times or anything, I mean, we all reveled in that same barrel and just said, well, that's our guy. He's one of us. And, since we were lacking the major TV deal, and we didn't get the same exposure that the NBA got, or that even college basketball got, or whatever. So we reveled in the successes of the individuals, because the successes of the individuals made the whole feel better. And when we had our All-Star weekends, and we had our finals, and we had significant times. Memories were being created because, the ABA was just very different. And, the whole feel of it, the red, white, and blue ball, we had ball girls way before, the NBA, and 3 referees and 3-point line. And, they wanted to, make it a showcase event. And Gervin, who was one of my teammates in Virginia, my second year that I was there, he got on to it real fast. He said, I can see how the fans, react when we do these things, and the idea of trying to steal the crowd before the game even starts, when you go on the road, with putting on a dunk exhibition, or him, shooting threes and making it rain. from 3-point land, like he was shooting a layup and whatever, with still crowds. So we'd go into the other arenas, and we'd always have some people cheering for us just because we stole them in the warm-ups.
Those were great memories. You're listening to Dr. J. The NBA merger happens, ABA, NBA. Knicks want $4.8 million from the Nets, for lack of a better term, invading their space. Now, we just talked about you were almost a Milwaukee Buck. Well, Knicks fans, all the stupidity did not start with Phil Jackson. Way back when, Roy Bowe, the owner of the Nets, offered you to the Knicks to kind of like pay off the $4.8 million that the Knicks wanted for the Nets infringing on their territory, and the Knicks turned it down. So, Knicks fans, don't feel bad. These stupid decisions happened 40 years ago. But how close were you to becoming a New York Knick?
I don't think it was close. I think it was just a discussion, and me going to the Knicks would have really killed the Nets, because the Nets still would have been there right in the backyard.
Yep.
And, the legitimacy of its franchise, I think, would have been marred. So that was just a deal that couldn't be done. I was set up pretty well in Long Island and, had a big home over in Upper Brookville and access to the Long Island Sound, and I could just almost look right across to Connecticut. So I didn't really want to go too far, and I actually 100% chose Philadelphia based on proximity.
The rivalry, I'm sorry.
That's a little-known fact, because, the way players decide where they're going these days, they look at who's on the team and the coach and the history of the team and, how they really fit in. They really diagnose it and analyze it from a lot of different perspectives. And for me, it was 100%. I could commute back to Long Island from Philadelphia. So That's where I'm going.
The Philly teams, the rivalries with Boston. We talked about the game with Larry Bird. You had them in the Eastern Conference Finals 4 times. Talk about that rivalry, because you were questioned after the game with Bird. You didn't not like Larry Bird. You just despised the Celtics. But that rivalry between you and them, and then basically you and the Lakers when you advanced past them, was unbelievable, and it was fascinating basketball. The rivalry between you and the Celtics.
Yeah. Well, it started way before me. Going back to Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, John Havlicek, Billy Cunningham, JoJo White, Hal Greer, and, even, during my run and Barkley's run in Philadelphia, our rivalry with Larry Bird and Robert Parrish, and that big three, that front line that they had.
Yep.
So, as you said, 4 conference finals, probably within a 7-year period, which was very intense. And, Milwaukee shouldn't be left out of that equation, because whoever got by Milwaukee, was generally pretty beaten up. And avoiding them was equally important as it was to avoid Boston, if you could. But we had many, many head-to-head matchups at the end of each season. When they did the statistical analysis, there was so little that separated the 2 franchises. Yep. And the 3 franchises, pretty much, and it just showed that we were the teams to beat in the East until the Bullets had their day.
Yep. Couple more for you. Couple players you play with in Philly. I got to know your feeling. World B. Free and Daryl Dawkins. Talk about those 2.
Well, just saw World B. Free last night, because I'm in Philadelphia now, and. It's so funny. I said, "Can you still shoot?" He said, "I will always be able to shoot, but I can't jump." Because he used to call himself the Prince of Midair.
Yep.
And I said, "Well, now you're the king of the ground."
He can go play just back in the 50s. I got you.
Yeah. But he used to elevate and he'd draw his knees up and he'd just kick his heels, and he actually would kick people if they came to guard him. So he was an amazing, really coordinated athlete who just made play after play, and definitely had his day. And his running buddy was Daryl Dawkins. So, can you just imagine, those 2 over in the corner discussing anything because both of them were wired differently, and they were great teammates to have because of their unpredictability off the court, which was exciting and fun. But on the court, you knew what you were going to get. Darryl's rule was whoever got it, shot it. Yeah. And World Be Free's motto was, "It's my world." And it was amazing how we were able to, take that team and take it to the finals, before, bowing down to Portland and being the, second best team in the world that year, with such a motley crew.
Dr. J. Julius Erving, the 1976 slam dunk competition. George Gervin, Larry Keane, David Thompson, yourself, and Artis Gilmore. Incredible. I mean, that's really when I think everybody realized, wow, this is unbelievable. You've been a judge at slam dunk competitions throughout. NBA took a lot of heat, the fact that how many different dunks can you do? The NBA All-Stars taking a lot of heat. Now, the All-Star game, when you played, it meant a lot the first time you played ABA, NBA. What would you do if you're commissioner for a day? How would you change the slam dunk competition to make it more appealing? And what would you do about the All-Star game itself?
Well, I think the answer to both those questions is the same thing. You have to replicate game situations. So there needs to be some resistance, whether it's the All-Star game or whether it's the slam dunk contest. I think the slam dunk contest would be great if there was a defender. If there was a defender there, and how you stage it remains to be seen. But maybe they're both incentivized. The guy coming in and making the dunk, obviously he's incentivized because he's scoring and he continues. But the guy making the defensive play, maybe there should be something in it for him. And the All-Star game needs to be the same way. I mean, you just can't have what we had a few weeks ago, where records are being broken and it's a practice drill, to see how many different ways guys can dunk the ball and what range guys had in terms of shooting the ball with no resistance.
Last one for you, Dr. J. All the shots you've made, and everybody loves them. My favorite one is Landsberger. The baseline one wasn't even a dunk. But I'm going to give you two others. The Rock the Baby dunk over Michael Cooper and the dunk in the finals over Bill Walton. Give me those three, the Issel dunk back when you talked about your rookie year of Virginia. Mm-hmm. What is your favorite dunk? You guys are a tight fraternity. I'm sure you run into Michael Cooper, and I'm sure you duck your head like he did at the end of that dunk. Which one do you get asked about the most, and which one gives you the most joy?
Yeah, I think the Michael Cooper dunk probably gets played the most, and I get asked about that the most. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? I think it's the one that players have made more comments about. So, the player's opinion is always, the most valuable one because those are your peers. And then if you get the players in the next generation, looking at that play and admiring it and saying, that's what I want to do. I could just see Kawhi Leonard doing that play, right now coming down on a break, just because he saw me do it, or, Michael Jordan, doing it because he saw me do it. And, that's actually paying homage.
Can you still dunk today at 66 years old?
Well, I'm 67.
Okay. Can you still dunk today at 67?
And I bet if I was incentivized through the necessary preparation, I could probably grab the rim.
What about a legend slam dunk competition?
Then I have to put it down and put a tennis ball in.
Dr. J. Julius Erving, bringing back unbelievable memories. I really appreciate all your time and look forward to speaking with you down the line. Thanks a lot, my friend. I appreciate it.
All right, you take care. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.